Olena will join us too? Or?
No.
Okay.
Better from the other side.
There?
Yeah, I think it's better there. There was one session that chair fell off the stage. Yes.
No accidents.
At least it wasn't a drunk Polish poet who once fell off the stage. It's amazing how drunk people kind of don't, and sometimes they get hurt. But
They bounce.
yeah, they somehow,
God
yeah,
to save them, God
whatever.
care on
I
them.
was recently in Prague and I was walking home and it was maybe 11 o'clock at night and there was this completely legless guy who was literally legless and he kept falling.
Falling.
Yeah.
I was once in a restaurant the other night. I was leaving the restaurant, it was in the basement, and the chef was over to us with a big bag of knives. And every step I thought was getting with it.
It's very hot.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to find one.
There is a second microphone. You just take it and exchange with us.
Sorry. So, welcome. What's happening? Yeah. Welcome to this session on literature and European identity. I'm Alexandra Buchler, and I'm the director of Literature Across Frontiers, which is a member organization of NLIT, the European Network for Literary Translation. And this session is an NLIT session. There was another one previously at 11 o'clock, which looked at the support for translation, the various forms that this support takes. And it's a pleasure to have this panel here. Actually, one important speaker is missing because she had to travel home. Olena Odinoka, who from Ukraine, was supposed to be on the stage as well, so unfortunately she isn't. And it's a great pleasure to introduce Svetlozar Zhelev from Bulgaria, from the Bulgarian Book Center. And Sinead McKay, who is from Ireland, Literature Ireland is the organization that she is the director of. Pavel Sibila from Slovakia, the Slovak Literature Center, and Paul Hermans from Belgium, from Flanders Literature. So we have a panel here that is quite varied and represents countries across Europe, some quite small ones, some bigger ones. But when we talk about translation and when we talk also about the whole question of identity connected to literature, we sometimes place the countries that have a lot of speakers of the language in the category of small languages because the literature does not get translated enough. So it's a kind of special dynamic. Now, we have been asked to address the issue of European identity and how it's reflected in literature. And it's quite a big topic, so we will see how we're going to deal with it. But I thought that we could start with the question of what is European identity, what it means to us. And I personally subscribe to to a kind of theory that was presented by the late Aleix de Beillac, who was a remarkable person. He unfortunately died very young, and he was a poet and a writer, essayist from Slovenia. And what he said about identity is that we really, talking about identity is we're looking at concentric circles of identity. So we can be one thing, but we can also be another thing in another larger circle. And the circles really start with our very immediate environment, which could be just a neighborhood or a locality. And then they move out. It's like a ripple effect. They move out to a national identity, European, international, and human identity. So I really like this way of looking at things, and so that would be how I would describe myself. Someone who was born in Prague, has lived in a number of countries, including here in Greece, and I live in the United Kingdom, which is where we are based in Wales, a bilingual country, another quite separate identity from England and Scotland and Ireland, or Northern Ireland. So at this point, I will ask the speakers to comment and tell us about how they see European identity in relation to themselves personally, or to the organization they represent, to the literature they promote. Svetlana.
Thank you. I'll try to start. Today I've write in my page in the social medias that my understanding of Europe is as a state of mind, and literature is a blood in this body, and the words are white blood cell who fight with the ignorance, fanatism, reactionism, everything that we really need to fight it, especially in the last days and years. For Bulgaria to be member of European Union, first let's start, okay, we have the continent, we have European Union, we have the understanding of Europe as for me, especially in the culture or the spirit kind of understanding is a state of mind. But to be part of the European family is something which really caused a lot of differences in the last years. We became members of European Union in 2007. And after that, as a part of this family, the change we really feel and we really see it as understanding, as attention on our literature is really different. I'm sure that most of you know and feel how important it is to be part of this family, to be part of something big. Of course, it creates other problems. Bulgarian language and Bulgarian literature, I always hate to say it, it's small language and small literature, but it's a literature and language with less attention, with the less interest. And our biggest goal is to find a way to put our literature and our writers on the bigger map of Europe and of course of the world. But to be European is something very important as a message. Our greatest writer, the most popular Bulgarian writer in the last decades, Georgi Gospodinov, who took the Booker Prize, the Booker International Prize last year, he always said that for him as a Bulgarian, he is first Bulgarian writer. After that, if you are lucky, you can become a Balkan writer. Maybe if you are really lucky, you will become a European writer. But he said, I just really want to be just writer. And this importance to share all this, moral, all this understanding of what is Europe as a state of mind, make us writers, translators, members of European Union, or just people. But Europe is this state of mind who give us freedom to make and to be calm that we are just persons, just people, and we shared what is important for us in all this continent, all this family, which is European Union and Europe. And to be ourselves is the best way to be Europeans. This is our understanding. Not to defend our national things or our national point of view, but to be part of the family, to be part of the European state of mind and European understanding of importance of all these things, starting from love to peace. This is my understanding of European identity. Yeah.
Well, I suppose for an Irish person, being European is in some ways being free. So we joined the European Union in 1973, and our economy, but I think also our self-confidence changed over the following 50 years, because we suddenly were focused on something that wasn't just our former colonial neighbours, Britain, who have since left the European Union. More specifically, I think in terms of literature, it's another kind of freedom. You know, I see the books that we support in translations across Europe, and we support about 100 books a year, most of them into other European languages, as benign Trojan horses that hopefully engender a kind of empathy with our country. So when somebody reads our literature, they're stepping into our shoes, and hopefully they're beginning to understand us a little bit better. Unfortunately, we don't do quite as much in the other direction. We don't have many translations going into English or Irish, our two national languages. But we do have some, and they're usually very well received. Just tonight, there's a launch in the building where my offices are of a book by a French novelist who imagined the lives of Beckett and Yeats and Freud, and created these beautiful psychological novels that have since been translated into English and are being published for an Irish readership. They've been published in Ireland. With the European Union Prize for Literature, we supported an Irish language novel, which went on to be translated into a language on the other side of Europe. It was translated directly from Irish into Estonian. And the book was set in the far west of Europe, on the Aran Islands. It's as far west as you can go, but also with a part of it set in Paris, in Brussels, and with some references to the Shoah in Estonia. So you have this exchange of ideas. And for me, a European identity is about not all being the same, but having a plurality of voices, but a great deal of understanding of those voices.
Works. I stick to the same question I stay just about talking about the European identity. We were discussing this question during break press with Sinead and Paul. And from the first side, the topic, European identity, looks really simple and easy. I mean, what's the question? There is EU, there is Europe as a continent. It should be easy to say what is European identity. But we find out it's not that easy. And one of the reasons, I think, is that we're talking about the European identity from the position of members of European Union, which is some kind of project which is not new. I mean, the attempts to unite different regions, different languages, different nations and nationalities were here like for ages. I mean, we can talk about the Roman Empire, we can talk about Carolus Magnus, we can talk about Habsburgs and Napoleon, and now we have European Union. And maybe this attempt failed, maybe, I don't know, all the past attempts failed, The difference was that this project, European Union, for the first time, is created not by the power and by the army, but by the ideas and by the will of the nations to join the project. So hopefully it will survive. But if it fails, I mean, from the world history point of view, it won't be anything like special. It happened before. And maybe the reason is that it's really hard to say what is our identity besides the geographical, question like we are neighbors. So I have to look at my notion because it's really not that easy question. But so my first point is not too easy. The answer, maybe there's no one answer. Maybe we are still searching for the answer, and one day we will find it. But I know that you, Alexander, like to hear to some answer, and also the people in the audience. So my second point is that I feel as a European, and I feel my European identity mostly when I'm abroad, especially in America or in Asia. And when I introduce myself in these continents, everybody is like, Slovakia, Slovenia, what? Ah, Europe, all right, you are European, you are from Europe. They don't care the Slovakia or Slovenia or Poland or Bulgaria or Ireland. For them, from Americans and Asians, we are Europe. There is our identity. And when we talk more, when we go deeper, I realize they imagine, and for them Europe is something really nice and precious, and what they appreciate are basically three things, maybe even more, but these three things came up always. First is free public universities. Is nothing common. It's not that common in US, for example, or in Asia also. So this is something they are envious of Europe. And then there is also public transport. It's not that common in other part of the world, to travel by public transport for little money and not to pollute all the air around you. And the third thing is social security, especially for young mothers, for mothers. These three things, I think, somehow identify Europe in view of the Asians and Americans and so on. And I'm glad that we have it, and it is something. And but I realize it sounds quite practical, and maybe you'd like to hear something noble when we're talking about values and identity. So, and I realized I said the same what Sinead and Svetlo said. For me, the core of the European identity is unity in diversity, the slogan of the Europe. I mean, something really, really exceptional. I think we still have to be careful not to, unite in unity like all Europe, and to be careful there is still diversity, because right now I feel like there is more pressure to be united in areas of life and politics, which maybe should stay at the national state. But I dream that one day the Europe will be really like the great example of this slogan, diversity, unity in diversity, and you can travel in Europe and you will experience like many different traditions, cuisine, languages, way of life, way of politics, everything, but it will be still Europe, but it will be really diverse, and it is diverse, but I still see it as a process, and we are not at the end of the process. As you imagine, like our countries, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and other countries from Eastern and Central Europe, we joined the Europe like just recently, we might say. It's 20 years ago, it's nothing special. So we are still at the beginning, and we can talk about these topics 100 years later, and maybe we will find the answer easier. Yeah, so that's from my side.
Yes, hello. Difficult. That's the words that keeps buzzing in my head. Difficult. I took it all for granted. Europe. I'm from Belgium, Flanders. Joined the European Union really in the beginning. So, yeah, European identity, that set of values that we share as a European Union or as Europe, it's very obvious, and at the same time, thinking about it now, it brings conflict in my mind because it's not just about Europe. We are now talking about the global circulation of literature. So it's not just Europe. It would be very bad to say that Europe as a unity and that anywhere else in the world we don't share these values. That's not true. So it brought difficulties in my mind to answer the questions that were stated here. So I took some notes because yesterday during the meeting I lost my speech several times. So I thought I need some backup in my phone. Important. Yeah, okay. Far from obvious. There is nothing natural about the national and linguistic categories that we use to classify literature, if we talk about literature and the European identity. However, nation and language are identifiable elements, possible instruments of convergence that help build our community. And Europe lacks these basic resources, a common language, for example, and a hegemonic cultural identity. But we have European literary tradition, dating back to Homer, made up of borrowings, influences, and circulation of literature since the Romans, read the Greeks, a powerful circuit of exchanges that characterizes the Middle Ages and the Renaissance when the common poets outweighed territorial and linguistic differences. So learning from history, this is certainly a central topic in the concept of Europe. It has frequently been said that the European Union has been built in consequence of a long history of war and violence, and literature has accompanied this process in manifold ways. And also, in this case, it's worth discovering the European dimension of literary heritage. But the number of authors who actually traveled through Europe and beyond bears witness to the experience of a social and cultural reality which has always been broader than the borders of a given country. So transnational and transcultural experience make up the concept of Europe in many ways. And here I find the concept by Amin Maalouf, the French-Lebanese writer, very interesting in defining this European identity. You talked about layers in the beginning. Well, Maalouf says, each of us should be encouraged to accept his own diversity, to see his identity as the sum of all various affiliations, instead of as just one of them raised to the status of the most important, made into an instrument of exclusion, and sometimes even into a weapon of war. Europe too, taken as a whole and insofar as it tends towards unity, certainly ought to see its own identity as the sum of all its linguistic, religious and other affiliations. If it does not accept every element in its history, if it fails to impress on its future citizens that they must learn to feel fully European without ceasing to be German or French or Italian or Greek, it will simply not be able to exist. Creating a new Europe means creating a new concept of identity for Europe itself, for all the countries in it, and to a certain extent for the rest of the world too. This is a definition I really love.
Well, thank you. And I actually didn't know this quote. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. And also thank you for remembering these dates, 73, which was, 50 years last year. And also this year we are really celebrating the 20th anniversary of European enlargement, which for me, and obviously a lot of other people, was a watershed moment. I remember it very, very clearly, and I remember the joy I felt because I had to leave my country when I was very young, and I had to do it because I wanted to be free. And of course, there's nothing like, complete freedom, but simply the freedom to be able to travel, to study, to learn other languages, to be able to speak them, was at that point freedom that I didn't have. And so I was forced to migrate. And when the UK left the European Union, which was an absolutely painful moment for me, I thought immediately about the young people who were being robbed of these opportunities. So hopefully things will change in the future, but also we are facing various challenges as Europe, whether Europe is seen as the European Union or a larger entity which still includes the United Kingdom as well. So it's almost like life that seemed to be really quite, positive 20 years ago. Now we've been facing a lot of problems, issues, challenges that complicate things. And but I'd like to go back to the main topic, which is identity, European identity, national identity, and literature. And we touched here on several topics which have to do with geopolitics, which have to do with historical themes, for example, which are shared. Would you be able to again relate maybe these topics to your to perhaps one author, one book from your country that that transcends national boundaries and does that in relation to shared themes?
I always refused to give one book. When somebody asked me, what is your favorite book? I said, I couldn't say one, but I used two, only two. Usually I use 10, but it will be only two. First, of course, is the Georgi Gospodinov's Time Shelter book, which is, for me, one of the most important book in the last 5 years on the exact European identity and the national identity in the European context. Book, if you don't know, I don't give you a lot of spoilers, but it's a book about the living in the past and the decision. It starts with the creation of a sanctuary for people who have Alzheimer's disease, which prefer to live in the past. In them past, but after that it's growing up to the state level, and the different countries in Europe decided in which decades they prefer to live in the past, with the idea in the future all countries in European Union to take one decade in the past where all of us will live together. This is our best memories from our past. Of course, the book finished before this. Maybe it will be the second part with this on this topic, which is the best decade for all of us in Europe to live. But this book make a definition on the national understanding of the nations and people live in European level. I really suggest you to read this book. It's amazingly great with a very poetic language and style. And the second book, called Border, by a Bulgarian writer who writes in English. She left Bulgaria when she was 17 in the 1991, and now she lives in Scotland, but she spent almost 20 years in New Zealand, and she writes in English. It's Kapka Kasabova, and her book is Border. It's a book about the people who lives on the border between Bulgaria, Turkey, and Greece. It's in the Rhodope Mountains, and she crossed a lot of times these borders between three countries, speak with the different people living on this, divided by these artificial borders, but actually they have the same problems, the same, everything is the same with them. And this is the problem. If I must answer on the first question, what is Europe? Actually, this is there is no borders. Europe, for me, is the most important thing because of no borders. And of course, we can speak about language as a border, as something that divides us. Now I speak in English, I can speak in Bulgarian, and maybe nobody will understand me. If you speak in Greek, I will not understand you. But the translation and literature, when I said that literature is the universal language, of course, everybody writes in a different language. But with the translations, we understand each other in a different level. This is a really universal language, the language of literature. And translations make us to know each other, to feel better, to understand each other, to have this empathy between us. These books, Time Shelter of Georgi Gospodinov and Kapka Kasabova's Border, is for me maybe the best examples from our part of literature.
Like Svetlo, I'm tempted not to name one book. It's better to name more, but I'll be as quick as I can. The first book that springs to mind is a book called The Magician by Colm Tobin. And it's a book inspired by the life of Thomas Mann. And it imagines his life. It traces his life from early childhood right through to his death. And the part of the book that fascinated me most, because like most people in Europe who read, I had read some of Thomas Mann's work, but what really fascinated me was his piecework, was the role that he played as a politician, in effect, when he went on tour across America, persuading American citizens that the idea of entering the Second World War was a good idea. And of course, the foundations of the European Union are based on this idea of making sure that there isn't a third world war. So I strongly recommend this book. It's being widely translated. I'm pretty certain it's in Greek and published by Icarus Publishing House. And for me, it was a fascinating revelation about the man. And of course, it's a work of fiction, it's imagined, but the biographical details for me were quite fascinating. This idea that one author could change so many people's minds and had such influence in terms of convincing a movement towards peace. And the psychological trauma of abandoning your own country in order to do that for the greater good. And authors have extraordinary power with their words. And of course, Mann was being translated, interpreted and translated. So that's the first one. The second person I'd mention is the poet Seamus Heaney, who was a truly European poet. He grew up in the northwest of Ireland, and Leicester Island treats the whole island as one. We support writers from the north and the south, and they're very happy to be included in our family of writing from the island of Ireland. But Seamus Heaney moved south to Dublin, and then he spent a lot of time in America. But he also spent a lot of time in Poland, and in fact, after he won the Nobel Prize, he visited Poland 9 times. He had a very close relationship with all sorts of Eastern European poets, people like Szymborska, people like Miroslav Holub. And he wrote, he studied their work. He also translated working with people like, I can't remember his name, Barshaw, famous Polish writer. And he was informed by this European thought. He translated parts of the Divine Comedy by Dante. And I think this idea of a European canon, the idea of looking at what the great European writers in the past have written, but continuing to do that in the current day is hugely important for mutual understanding. And there again, translation is the passport to understanding. So for me, translation in Europe is essential if we are to continue to understand each other.
I will mention just one author, but instead of second author, I'd like to comment some things that have been said here, if I can. When Svetlo, I realized one funny thing. When Svetlo was talking about if he speaks Bulgarian, probably no one would understand. So that's why he speaks English, and we can understand each other, even though we are from different regions of Europe. I realize it's a really funny paradox that lingua franca of Europe right now is English, the language of a nation and the country who left the EU. But
we have Ireland.
we have okay, all right. I correct myself. You're right. It's nice. Second comment would be what Paul was reading, that Malraux, he was citing the Malraux, and you said you liked the definition you found, and at the end of what you were reading was something like we should try to create European identity where we feel really like Europeans and without feeling Germans or something like that. And I don't agree. I think it's possible both to feel a German or Slovak or Bulgarian, also feel European.
But it didn't say without feeling German, just as at the same height.
All right. Okay. Then I missed this. Okay. Then I understand because I think to try to somewhere above us is against our. Like our life, and is some kind of social engineering. I think life works. I mean, you feel identity which is closer to you, and the way of life begins with your family, and you feel strong identify and connection to your family, then to your village, then to your nation and the language, and then you can feel as a European or world citizen. There are people who are world citizen. I don't feel like these connections, but I think it's possible both. Okay, so then I misheard it. And when I should mention one Slovak author who is like an example of a European author who transcends his like a national writing and identity to European, I would mention poet Mila Haugová. She's 80. I would say it's right now the greatest Slovak poet. And I'm talking about her from two reasons. One reason is her life, which is really an example of life of the European. She was born in Budapest in 1941, and her grandparents were from one side were Hungarians, so she speaks Hungarian. She was raised in Slovakia, and most of her life she lived in Slovakia. But after Russians came to Czechoslovakia in 1968, she left Czechoslovakia. At that time it was Czechoslovakia, to Canada. But after 1 year, they came back with her husband. They realized they can't live abroad or and for her at that time already was language really important. It was time when she started to write poems, and so they came back. She also speaks great German. So she traveled a lot to Germany. She translates or helps translate her poems to German. So she is trilingual and very active lady in her 80. And there are other few details that there are a great example of what can be the life of the European and Central Europe, especially with a lot of conflicts. And the second reason why I'm talking about her are her poems, which are by definition, I would say, really, most of the time, personal and intimate. They are not about nations and practical things. They are they can touch people wherever on the world are read, and her poems are great. And I realized when I was thinking about this answer, but maybe also the poetry is some part of the European identity, because 2 weeks ago I was a part of the reading, because I'm also author, and before me there were two young poets who were reading their poems, and I realized I probably couldn't do it. If I'm writing poems, I'm not sure if I would be able to go on the stage and read the poems, because they are personal, intimate, and for me it's difficult to talk about personal and intimate topics, even though through the poem, but still, I mean, you're going naked in front of the people. And maybe it is part of our identity, because what I know, for example, for people from Asia, for them in like a general discussion, it's quite difficult to show what they really think and what they really know. You know, that it's some kind of, they're really like, sometimes you feel like you're talking to a robot. And I like to read the poems from Japan. I have to do it after we finish here. And to see if they're all the same intimate and personal as poems of a European author. Maybe they are not. And if they are not, maybe the poetry is part of our identity. So, but remember please one name, Mila Haugova, is a great poet.
Okay, one writer, I'll stick to the script, just one. I would really like to mention Gaia Schouters, because it is not translated yet into Greek. So to all the Greek publishers here, a warm welcome to talk to me afterwards, because this book by Gaia Schouters, that's the author, it's called Trophy. It is translated into French and Arabic and Croatian and Bulgarian and German and Danish and Hungarian and lots of languages. And everywhere it's the same thing. This book transcends into a feeling as a reader you rarely experience. It's a book that makes you feel sick after you've read it. It makes you think, not in a wrong way. I mean, it's a writer that did something tremendous here. She didn't wrote a book with a moralistic finger, but it's a sort of an ethical mindfuck about how we see hunting and nature, and how we see, as the Western world, let's say, Africa. It's a toxic male, just to be short, Hunter White, an American who wants to finish his Big 5 hunt. He only needs to shoot a rhino. He pays a lot of money to shoot this rhino somewhere in Africa. It's not even denominated where. And he fails, and then something else happens. He gets an offer from the local community to shoot a young black boy, even with the help of the community, of his friends. And then strange things happen, and I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's a book that in a weird way takes you on a trip where you don't feel you're in a, you have some sympathy even for this hunter, and afterwards, as I say, you feel sick. And this is a book that is really un-Belgian, un-Flemish, let alone, I don't know, European. It's a masterpiece, and I took the time to make some free advertising for this title.
Well, this is this is really why you are here, to advertise, to promote your authors and your literatures. I'm really intrigued by what you said now, Paul, that the book is un-Belgian. And when you were actually talking about it, the one thing that came to my mind was that we actually sit here divided by one thing, and that's the colonial history of Europe. And I often try to explain, well, united and divided, because there are perspectives, let's say, in Eastern Europe, where we really feel in relation to debates around diversity and postcolonialism, that we have a different kind of postcolonialism. We're analyzing postcolonialism related to being colonized and not colonizing. So we know very well that Belgium has its colonial history, and it was very dramatic and cruel. So yes, these are topics that are, as you say, they divide us, they unite us. But reading about an anti-hero like that, or anti-hero, as we would say in English, why is this a book that you find so fascinating? Because you said you finish
exactly
it and
because
it makes you
exactly because
ill.
of the fact that
Yeah.
that's a book that is dangerous because
Yes.
of our history.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she, as a writer, did a magnificent job in not falling into the ordinary pitfalls of being heaving the moralic finger, but just taking the reader into a trip. And if the end would be, oh, it was a thriller and I liked it and nothing more, then it would be a total failure. But no, in the end, as a reader, you feel dirty because you're tricked by the ambush that the writer was able to create, and you think about the way we still look at Africa as a continent, as a sort of a whole, which is completely wrong, of course. And that's what she makes you think. She makes you feel you have a lot of work to do in your thinking, and that's the bottom line here. That's why it's such an enormous book.
I get that. It makes us think, and not just feel. I think at this point I'd like to ask the audience if they have questions. And do we have a roving mic? Do we have a microphone for? Yeah, great. Okay, gentleman over there.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your presentations. It was very nice to hear so many European points of view. I am Greek, and the question of European identity is a very important question in Greece. This is because of our history. Although I suppose we are credited with the beginnings of European civilization, we spent 400 years under Ottoman Empire rule, and also geography didn't help, especially at the time of communism. We were cut off really from Europe to a large extent. So we always had the expression, I'm going to Europe. When we go to Paris or to London, we go to Europe. We don't say that anymore today, but it's still in our minds, I would say. Now, for me, literature has already created a European identity. When I think of Marcel Proust or James Joyce, or that is Europe. That gives me a warm feeling that I, along with all the Greeks, we belong to all this, and that is European identity for me. I think you said it already, essentially at this point. And of course, translations. We have a lot of translations in Greece, maybe more than the Greek books, I don't know, because we have to read all these different languages, all the different, because we are a small language. Finally, I would like to say that, unfortunately, identity is a political concept. And we are very much aware of this now with the European elections coming up in 3 weeks. And I just wish to wish ourselves good luck with the way politics in Europe is going, and hope that the challenges that Europe has. I forgot to mention that I worked in Brussels in the European Commission for 31 years, and that was a fascinating job. And it's something that we all need to work on, this European identity, and literature surely helps. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. There wasn't a question. Anybody would like to ask a question? Or make a comment, that's fine. Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah. Just if prepare your questions, please. I just want to say that two of the books that we spoke about, the Time Shelter of Georgi Gospodinov and The Magicians of Colm Tóibín, actually are about Thomas Mann and the Magician's Mountain, because the Georgi Gospodinov took the idea of clinic of the past from the Magician's Mountains, and Colm Tóibín make this novelized biography of Thomas Mann. And this is how European literature and how literature works to make all of us Europeans. This is for me the best example. And I took the opportunity from Paul about how now it works and how Europe calls in our literature. Last year, the novel of the year in Bulgaria was the novel called Hagabula by Todor Todorov, and it was one of the special mentions and European Union Prize for Literature. Tomorrow there will be talks about the European Union Prize for Literature, but this book is absolutely no Bulgarian. It's absolutely nothing with Bulgaria. It's about Hernan Cortes and traveling not to Mexico, not to invading the Aztec Empire, but a kind of alternative story. This is how Europe and how literature works. It's make and change us, and we change it via our national or literature understanding.
Are you now secretly giving a third title of Bulgarian literature?
Yeah, it's true. But it's, for me, Europe is a family. Bulgaria is a member of Traduki Network, who organize 14 countries, 4 German-speaking countries and 10 Balkan countries, except Greece. I hope Greece will be part of Traduki in the next years. But to be part of the family, to exchange ideas, literature, to support translations, this define Europe and the family.
Thank you. Anyone else? We still have a few minutes. Or maybe one of the speakers. Some more books, yes. And at this point, I'd like to say that, of course, we are representing a network here, a network of organizations that promote literature, that promote the best of literature from their countries. So if you go to the website, which is projected on the screen, and you click on members, and then you click through to their websites, you can find out more about the titles they promote. So if you want more titles, you can do it that way, yes. And we have some leaflets here as well. Any more comments from the...
I just want to echo what the gentleman in the blue shirt said earlier. I really do think that reading each other is crucial, and that is what forms a European identity. I accept that an identity is used now in very political sense, but in the broader sense, if I read Balzac, if I read Homer, if I read Holub, I get an insight. I can step into the shoes of other mentalities. And I would urge our educators to ensure that literature in translation is part of the syllabus. It's crucial that we read each other if we are to survive as a family.
True, but it doesn't stop at the border of Europe. Ah.
No more borders.
Debordering. Yeah.
We have to read each other, but I think at the moment it's particularly important that Europeans read each other. Of course we need to read South Americans and Indian authors, absolutely, and that is the way forward. But just at the moment I would strongly urge that we read each other in Europe. It's too easy to use shorthand and to resent each other for one reason or another, and literature teaches empathy.
Thank you so much. We may be the only panel that will actually finish on time. And so thank you very much. A hand of applause. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you to the audience.